The Unexpected Guardian. The sunset on Proxima Centauri painted the crystalline forests in shades of crimson and amber. Ray's Morgan wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the settings on his geological scanner. 6 months into his solar research mission, he'd grown accustomed to the planet's higher gravity and peculiar day cycles. What he hadn't grown accustomed to was the loneliness. Recording XG4392, he spoke into his data recorder. Crystal formations in Sector 7 show unusual electromagnetic properties, possibly related to the upcoming solar flare activity predicted by Observatory Station. He paused as his scanner picked up something unexpected: seismic activity approximately 12 kilometers west of his position. That was odd. His preliminary surveys had shown this region to be tectonically stable. Rez packed his equipment and climbed into his terrain vehicle, curiosity overriding his scheduled return to base camp. The tremors intensified as he approached, his vehicle's stabilizers struggling to compensate. Cresting a ridge, he stopped short at the sight before him. In the valley below stood a settlement unlike anything in human records, organic-looking structures with iridescent shells rising from the ground like giant mollusks. More shocking were the inhabitants, tall, slender beings with exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian and 4 articulated arms moving with precise, graceful motions. Kalari, Ray's whispered, recognizing the reclusive insectoid species from briefings. Mankind had established limited diplomatic contact with them 3 years ago, but interactions remained minimal. What were they doing here, on a planet marked for human scientific exploration? His scientific curiosity was interrupted by another violent tremor. This one different, directional, as though something were moving beneath the surface. His scanner screamed warnings an instant before the ground erupted 2 kilometers from the settlement. A massive segmented creature burst from below, its armor-plated body reflecting the dying sunlight. It resembled a centipede the size of a subway train, with crystalline growths jutting from its exoskeleton. The Kalari settlement responded with alarm, lights flashing, figures rushing in coordinated evacuation patterns. Rise's communications device activated automatically, translating distant distress signals. The creature, something the translation rendered as crystal boar, had awakened prematurely from hibernation due to the electromagnetic fluctuations. Worse, it was heading directly for the settlement, drawn to the energy signatures of Kalari technology. As Rise watched in horror, the creature accelerated, mandibles the size of bulldozer blades snapping. His hand hovered over his emergency beacon. Protocol dictated non-interference with alien civilizations unless explicitly cleared by Central Command. Getting involved could cost him his research license, maybe even prosecution under the Non-Interference Act. A flash of movement caught his eye. A smaller Kalari figure separated from the evacuation, trapped between 2 fallen structures. The crystal borer changed direction, sensing easier prey. Riz slammed his vehicle into gear, protocol end. He raced down the slope, pushing the terrain vehicle beyond safety parameters. His mind calculated trajectories and timing as he angled toward an intercept course. The trapped Kalari, clearly smaller, likely younger, was attempting to free itself from debris while signaling frantically to the retreating settlement. "Hold on," Riz muttered, though he knew they couldn't hear him. He activated the vehicle's emergency lights, hoping to distract the creature. It worked, momentarily. The crystal borer paused, sensory appendages twitching toward this new stimulus before resuming its charge toward the trapped Kalari. Rice reached the fallen structure seconds before the borer. He leaped from his vehicle, atmospheric respirator barely secured as he scrambled over the debris. Up close, the young Kalari's exoskeleton shimmered with iridescent blues and purples. 4 multifaceted eyes regarded him with what he interpreted as shock. "I'm here to help," he said, knowing his translator would convert his words. "Can you move?" "My lower limb is trapped," came the translated response, the voice distinctly feminine despite the mechanical rendering. "The crystal eater approaches. You must save yourself, human." "Not happening," Reyes replied, assessing the debris. The fallen structure was too heavy to lift directly. Physics, however, offered alternatives. He jammed his geological scanner between sections of the debris, creating a makeshift lever. The ground trembled as the crystal borer closed in. 50 meters. 30. The scanner groaned under pressure as Race threw his weight against it. The debris shifted just enough. "Now," he shouted. The young Kayluri pulled free, her movements fluid despite the injury. Race grabbed her, noting with surprise how light she was despite her size, and sprinted back to his vehicle. The crystal borer lunged, mandibles snapping where they had stood seconds before. The terrain vehicle's engine screamed as Rice pushed it to maximum acceleration. The crystal borer followed, surprisingly fast for its size. The Kayluri tapped the vehicle's console with two of her forehands, interfacing directly with the system. "Your power source," she said. "It emits the energy signature attracting the crystal eater." Riss glanced at the settlement, now distant but still in the creature's eventual path once it finished with them. "Can we lead it away?" "Yes," she replied. "But the risk?" "Worth it," Rays interrupted. He swerved toward the crystalline forest, away from the settlement. The borer followed, just as he'd hoped. What followed was a desperate chase through increasingly dense crystal formations. The Kayluri manipulated the vehicle's systems with remarkable efficiency, optimizing performance beyond normal parameters. Riz navigated by instinct and adrenaline, using the crystalline towers as slalom markers. There, the Kayluri pointed toward a massive crystal formation ahead. The resonance frequency of that structure will disrupt its sensory apparatus. Rice understood immediately. "We need to get it to crash into the crystal." He circled the massive crystal tower, the borer closing the gap with each pass. On the third circuit, he cut the engines briefly, then reactivated them at full power. The creature, momentarily confused by the disappearing energy signature, plowed directly into the crystal formation. The impact resonated across the valley. The crystal tower fractured, collapsing onto the stunned creature. Crystal shards penetrated its armor, immobilizing it in a prison of its own making. Silence fell, broken only by the labored breathing of both passengers. "You saved my life," the young Kayluri said, her translator conveying wonder. "At great personal risk." "Anyone would have done the same," Rez replied, suddenly aware of how untrue that statement was. "Most humans would have followed protocol." "I am Nixia," she introduced herself, daughter of High Counselor Varys of the Kayluri Concordat. Rice felt his stomach drop. Not just any Kayluri, but essentially royalty in their hierarchical society. Rice Morgan, xenogeologist. Human, obviously. Before Nixia could respond, multiple Kayluri vessels appeared overhead, descending rapidly. Within minutes, they were surrounded by what appeared to be security forces, their exoskeletons bearing more pronounced armor plates. A taller Kayluri emerged from the central vessel, her exoskeleton bearing intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer with authority. 4 eyes fixed on Rise with an intensity that made him instinctively straighten his posture. "Mother," Nixia said, moving forward with a slight limp. "This human saved me from the Crystal Eater. Without his intervention, I would have joined the ancestors." The elder Kayluri, High Counselor Varys, Race presumed, studied him silently. When she finally spoke, her translated words carried unmistakable weight. "You saved my daughter from certain death, human. By our most sacred law, the debt of life now binds us." "I'm sorry," Race replied, confusion evident. "I don't understand." "The debt of life cannot be refused or declined." Varys continued as if he hadn't spoken. "It is the oldest of our traditions. When one saves a Kayluri life at great personal risk, they become bound in life debt." Nixia stepped forward. "Mother, he is not familiar with our ways." "The law transcends species," Varys stated firmly. "Rice Morgan of Earth, you have saved my daughter from planetary disaster. By our law, you must take us both." "Take you?" Rise echoed, bewildered. "Take you where?" "Into your protection, your household, your life." Varys explained, until the debt is balanced through service or sacrifice of equal measure. As the implications dawned on him, Race stared at the two alien females, one young and curious, the other regal and determined. His simple research mission had just become exponentially more complicated. "I think," he said slowly, "we should probably discuss this." Behind them, the trapped crystal borer gave a mournful cry as Kaleri containment specialists moved in to secure it. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across a landscape forever changed by a single act of compassion, the bond of obligation. 2 weeks later, Rice found himself aboard the Kaleri diplomatic vessel Luminous Accord, staring out at the unfamiliar stars. His research equipment, personal belongings, and terrain vehicle had been meticulously packed and stored in the cargo hold. His research station stood abandoned, an automated message sent to Earth explaining his diplomatic reassignment, a convenient fiction created by Varys to avoid the complications of explaining a life debt to human authorities. "Your discomfort is understandable," Nixia said, joining him at the viewport. Her wounded limb had healed with remarkable speed, leaving no trace of injury. "Few outsiders have been bound by the debt of life. Few outsiders rescue Kaleri royalty from giant crystal-eating monsters," Reyes replied with a wry smile. "I am not royalty," Nixia corrected. "The High Council is meritocratic, not hereditary. My mother earned her position through scientific achievement and leadership." "And what's your role?" "I am a xenobiologist specializing in interspecies communication." Her head tilted in what Rice had come to recognize as the Kaleri equivalent of a smile. "Which makes you a particularly fascinating subject." "Glad to be of service," he said, unable to keep a touch of sarcasm from his voice. Nixia's antennae twitched, a sign of amusement. "You resist our traditions, yet you risked everything to save me. Humans are wonderfully contradictory." Before Race could respond, the ship's lighting shifted to a deeper blue, an indication that High Counselor Varys was approaching. Despite himself, Race straightened. Something about the elder Kaleri commanded respect. "We approach the Nexus jump point," Varys announced. "From there, it is a short journey to Kalora Prime." "Your homeworld," Race said. "Yes, the first human to set foot there in recorded history." Varys's 4 eyes studied him with scientific precision. "Your actions have accelerated our species' timeline for deeper integration considerably." "I wasn't thinking about interspecies diplomacy when I saw your daughter in danger," Reyes admitted. "Precisely why the debt is valid," Varys replied. "Calculated gestures carry no weight in our traditions. Only authentic risk taken without expectation of reward creates the bond." The ship shuddered slightly as it aligned with the Nexus jump point, a naturally occurring space-time anomaly that the Kaleri had mapped and stabilized for faster-than-light travel. The stars outside the viewport elongated, then blurred into streams of light. "You should rest," Varys advised. "The transition affects different species in various ways." Sure enough, Rice felt a wave of disorientation wash over him. Nixia steadied him with 2 of her 4 arms. "I will guide you to your quarters," she offered. As they moved through the ship's organic-looking corridors, Riz noticed other Kaleri, watching him with what appeared to be a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Not everyone, it seemed, was pleased with his presence. "Your mother mentioned service or sacrifice of equal measure," Race said as they reached his quarters. "What exactly does that entail?" Nixia hesitated. "The debt is fulfilled when the lifesaver judges it so, or when they have received service of equal value to the life saved. So I decide when it's paid." "In theory," she conceded. "Though in practice, few ever declare the debt fulfilled. The bond becomes valuable to both parties." With that cryptic statement, she left him to rest. Sleep came surprisingly easily in the alien environment, though his dreams were filled with crystal forests and many-eyed observers. When he woke, they had arrived at Kalora Prime. The planet hung in space like a massive opal swirling blues and greens beneath a pearlescent atmosphere. From orbit, He could see vast hive cities connected by thread-like transportation networks. "Beautiful," he whispered as Nixia joined him for the descent. "We think so," she agreed, though many would find its atmospheric composition toxic without protection. The landing was smoother than any Rise had experienced on Earth vessels. They touched down in what appeared to be a private docking area attached to an imposing structure of interlocking hexagonal chambers. "The High Council Nexus," Nixia explained, "Mother's residence and the center of Kalari governance." A delegation awaited them. 12 Kalari with elaborately marked exoskeletons, each pattern indicating a different scientific or governmental specialty. Their reaction to Rise ranged from fascinated to openly hostile. "Esteemed colleagues," Varys addressed them formally, "I present Rise Morgan of Earth, who is bound to my household by the debt of life." A murmur ran through the assembled officials. One stepped forward, his exoskeleton bearing red-orange markings that seemed to pulse with intensity. "High Counselor Varys, this is highly irregular," he said, his translator rendering his tone as precisely disapproving. "A non-Kalari bound by the sacred debt, and a human, no less. Their species barely understands interplanetary travel. Yet they understand compassion, Counselor Thraxis," Varys replied smoothly, "a quality sometimes overlooked in our pursuit of advancement." Thraxis' antennae flattened against his head. "The Council must convene on this matter. The human's presence has implications, as is your right," Varys acknowledged. "Until then, he remains under my protection, as tradition demands." The councillors dispersed, leaving only Thraxis lingering. He approached Riz, studying him with unsettling intensity. "Remarkable timing," he said quietly. "That you should be precisely where needed, precisely when needed." "Lucky coincidence," Riz replied, maintaining eye contact despite his discomfort. "The Kalari do not believe in coincidence, human." With that, Thraxis departed, his movements unnaturally stiff compared to the fluid grace Rice had observed in other Kalari. "Do not mind Thraxis," Nixia said once he was out of earshot. "He leads the preservation faction, those who believe interaction with other species dilutes our culture." "Charming," Riz muttered. "Is he always so suspicious?" "Only of threats to his worldview," Varys interjected. "Come, you must be properly accommodated." The High Counselor's residence within the Nexus was spacious and filled with objects that straddled the line between art and scientific instruments. Rice was provided with a chamber adapted for human physiology, the gravity adjusted, atmosphere filtered, and furnishings modified for his anatomy. Over the following days, Race was introduced to Kalari culture in carefully measured doses. He learned their language, though the translator remained essential for complex concepts, studied their history, and observed their daily rituals. In return, he shared human knowledge, particularly his geological expertise, which the Kalari found surprisingly advanced. What struck him most was the depth of their scientific understanding. The Kalari had mastered principles of quantum mechanics that Earth scientists had barely theorized. Yet they lacked certain intuitive leaps that humans took for granted. Outside-the-box thinking that Reyes demonstrated repeatedly in problem-solving exercises. His relationship with Nixia evolved from awkward formality to genuine friendship. Her curiosity matched his own, creating a foundation of mutual respect. Varys remained more enigmatic, though Reyes occasionally caught her observing their interactions with what appeared to be satisfaction. One evening, approximately a month into his stay, Race was invited to attend a council session, an unprecedented honor for a non-Kalari. The chamber was a perfect dome, with 13 hexagonal platforms arranged in a circle. Varys occupied the central position, with Thraxis and the other councillors surrounding her. "The council acknowledges Rice Morgan of Earth," Varys announced, "bound by the debt of life and under my protection." Thraxis immediately rose. "Esteemed colleagues, I move to address the security concerns presented by the humans' unprecedented access to Kalari knowledge." "What concerns?" another counselor asked. "Consider the timing," Thraxis continued. "A human researcher, alone, happens upon the High Counselor's daughter in peril. When that sector was specifically designated off-limits to human exploration. Rice frowned. This was news to him. His research permits had shown no such restrictions. Furthermore, Thraxis pressed, his expertise in geological sciences aligns suspiciously well with our current crystal resonance project, a project that could revolutionize interstellar communication, or be weaponized. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Riz looked to Varys, whose expression remained unreadable. "Are you suggesting," another counselor spoke, "that this human deliberately orchestrated these events to gain access to our research?" "I suggest nothing," Thraxis replied smoothly. "I merely observe patterns that demand investigation." Rice stood, surprising the assembly. "With respect, Counselor Thraxis, I had no knowledge of any restricted zones. My presence was authorized by the Joint Species Exploration Committee, and until I rescued Nixia, I had no idea the Kaluri were present on Proxima Centauri." "Convenient claims," Thraxis responded. "Yet we only have your word." "And mine," Nixia interjected, rising from her observer position. "I have reviewed the humans' research permits. They contain no restriction markers. Someone altered the designation after the fact." The chamber erupted in discussion. Varys raised all four hands, restoring order. "These are serious allegations, daughter. Do you have evidence?" "The timestamp signatures don't match the standard encryption protocol," Nixia explained. "A basic forensic analysis reveals manipulation." Thrax's exoskeleton darkened, a sign of anger or alarm. "This is absurd. The human has clearly influenced." A thunderous explosion interrupted him, rocking the entire chamber. Warning signals flashed across communication panels. Security officers rushed in, surrounding the council members. "The Nexus is under attack," one reported urgently. "Unknown technology has breached our outer defenses." Through the chamber's transparent dome, Race could see ships, not Kaluri design, descending through the atmosphere. Their configuration was unfamiliar, yet something about them triggered a memory. "Those aren't human vessels," he said quickly, seeing suspicion on several counselors' faces. "But I've seen similar design elements before, in restricted files about an encounter at the edge of our solar system." Varys turned to him sharply. "What encounter?" "A brief skirmish 3 years ago. The vessels retreated before identification was possible. It was classified. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication system activated, projecting a holographic figure in the center of the room. The being was neither human nor Kaluri, its form vaguely reptilian with cybernetic enhancements visible across its body. Kaluri Council. It spoke, its voice translated automatically. "Your isolation ends today. Your crystal resonance technology belongs to the Draconis Collective now." Thraxis stepped forward, his posture suddenly deferential. "The timeline has accelerated due to unforeseen complications. The human's presence is irrelevant," the reptilian being interrupted. "Our agents have secured the primary research facilities. Prepare for transition of authority." The hologram disappeared, leaving stunned silence. "Traitor," Varys said quietly, staring at Thraxis. "You sold our people to the collective." Thraxis's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "I saved our people from stagnation. The human presence forced my hand. They were too close to discovering the crystal resonance principles themselves." Security forces moved to apprehend him, but Thraxis activated something on his wrist. A shield of energy surrounded him. "The collective offers advancement, protection, purpose," he declared. "More than your misguided policies of isolation." Varys. Outside, the attack intensified. The chamber shook with nearby impacts. "We need to evacuate," Race said, moving to Nixia's side protectively. "Is there a secure location?" Varys nodded grimly. "The ancestral chambers, deep beneath the Nexus. They're shielded against all known scanning technology." As they rushed from the council chamber, Reyes realized that the life debt had evolved into something far more complex than he could have imagined. He was no longer just bound to two Kaleri. He was now entangled in an interstellar conflict with implications for both their species. Two worlds united. The ancestral chambers beneath the Nexus extended for kilometers, a labyrinth of crystalline tunnels and caverns that predated Kaleri recorded history. As they descended, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across walls etched with mathematical formulas so complex they resembled art. The Draconis Collective, Ray said once they had reached a secure chamber. Who are they? Varys activated a holographic display with a wave of her hand. A consortium of technologically advanced species, united by a philosophy of forced evolution through technology acquisition. They believe the strongest should absorb the innovations of others by negotiation or conquest. And Thraxis has been working with them. So it appears, Varys confirmed. The preservation faction has grown increasingly extreme in recent years, but I never suspected outside influence. Around them, other council members and essential personnel were establishing a command center. Reports flowed in. The attackers had secured the upper levels of the Nexus and 3 major research facilities, but resistance was organizing across the planet. What exactly is this crystal resonance technology they're after? Rise asked. Nixia and Varys exchanged glances. It is difficult to explain in human scientific terminology, Nixia began. Essentially, we discovered that certain crystalline structures can transmit information instantaneously across any distance, regardless of spatial separation. Rise's eyes widened. Quantum entanglement on a macro scale. That's theoretically impossible. For human science, perhaps, Varys acknowledged. We have developed prototypes that can transmit data. The collective would undoubtedly weaponize it. Imagine attacks that materialize simultaneously across multiple worlds with no warning. A communication officer approached urgently. High Counselor, we've intercepted collective transmissions. They're preparing to transfer our research data to their command ship in orbit. How long do we have? Varys asked. 3 hours at most. Our defensive forces are overwhelmed, and they've established jamming fields preventing large-scale evacuations. Reyes studied the holographic map showing collective positions. Something about their deployment pattern struck him as familiar, reminiscent of mining operations he'd observed on resource-rich asteroids. They're treating this like a resource extraction, he realized aloud. Minimal damage to infrastructure, focused security at data nodes, controlled population containment. An apt observation, Varys agreed. They want our knowledge intact. Then that's their vulnerability, Reyes continued. Excitement building. In mining operations, extraction teams establish predictable patterns to maximize efficiency. If they're following similar protocols here. He pointed to several locations on the map. These would be their primary data consolidation points, where information is processed before transmission to the command ship. Nixia leaned closer, her antennae quivering with interest. The pattern does match their troop deployments. We need a small team, Reese said, formulating a plan. If we can reach the Central Research Archive, we might be able to corrupt the data before transmission, not destroy it. They'd detect that, but subtly alter it to be unusable. A precision strike, Varys mused, but our forces cannot penetrate their perimeter. They're not looking for humans, Reese pointed out. One human, accompanied by Kaleri who appear to be cooperating under duress, might move more freely. The council debated briefly, but with options limited and time running short, they approved the desperate plan. A team was assembled. Riz, Nixia, and 3 specially trained Kaleri security officers who could pass as research staff. As they prepared, Varys approached Rice privately. The dead of life does not require this risk, she said quietly. You have already saved my daughter once. Rice checked the atmospheric adapter they'd provided him, essential for the upper levels where environmental controls might be compromised. This isn't about the dead, he replied. This is about doing what's right. Besides, I'm a xenogeologist. Crystal structures are literally my specialty. You are unlike any human in our records, Varys observed. Maybe you need to update your records, Race suggested with a smile. Their ascent through the ancient tunnels was tense but uncontested. The collective forces had focused their attention on modern structures, overlooking the primitive pathways that honeycomb the planet's crust. They emerged in a maintenance shaft connected to the Central Research Archive, now a primary collective data extraction point. As predicted, the collective forces, a mix of reptilian beings and mechanical drones, paid little attention to what appeared to be captured Kaluri researchers led by a cooperative human. Their disguises held as they were escorted through checkpoints, Riss deliberately speaking loudly about human mining techniques to distract guards from the nervous movements of his companions. The archive itself was a massive crystalline dome housing the accumulated scientific knowledge of generations. Collective technicians had attached their equipment to the central crystal matrix, interface devices that pulsed with energy as they siphoned data. They're using a standard extraction protocol, one of the disguised security officers whispered, but it's being filtered through translation matrices. Because they don't fully understand the crystal encoding, Nixia realized. They need to convert it to their format first. Rich studied the equipment while pretending to examine nearby specimens. That gives us an opportunity. If we can access the primary crystal matrix, we could introduce a recursive error into the base translation algorithm, creating cascading mistranslations that would render the data meaningless. Nixia continued his thought. Brilliant. Under the guise of conducting an inventory for their captors, the team spread through the archive. Reyes worked his way toward the central console, while Nixia created diversions by accidentally activating specimen containment alarms. When he finally reached the interface point, Rice faced a challenge. The controls were configured for collective physiology. He signaled one of the security officers, who subtly adjusted the system while pretending to clean nearby equipment. "I need 3 minutes," Reyes murmured as he began typing commands into the newly accessible terminal. "Authorized personnel only. Human," a harsh voice interrupted. A collective supervisor had noticed his activities. Rice didn't look up, affecting an air of board compliance. "Just following orders. Your commander wanted human verification of the translation protocols. Something about Earth databases being formatted differently." The supervisor hesitated, compound eyes narrowing. "I received no such order." "Check with command level," Reyes suggested casually. "Authorization code Epsilon 279. I can wait." It was a gamble. He had observed the collective using similar code structures in their communications. The supervisor's hesitation lengthened as he apparently consulted through some internal communication system. "Continue," the supervisor finally said, "but expedite your process." The moment the supervisor moved away, Rice's fingers flew across the interface. He wasn't just introducing errors. He was implementing a far more ambitious plan. His geological background gave him unique insight into crystal structures that even the Kaluri might overlook. "Done," he whispered to Nixia as she passed by. "But we need to leave. Immediately." They regrouped and began making their way toward the exit, maintaining their captive-captor pretense. They had nearly reached the outer doors when alarms blared across the facility. "Data corruption detected," announced an automated system. "Security lockdown initiated." "Run," Reyes shouted, abandoning the pretense as collective forces converged on their position. What followed was a desperate sprint through corridors increasingly filled with hostile forces. The security officers proved their worth, creating distractions and clearing paths as they retreated toward the ancestral tunnels. One officer fell, then another. The third sacrificed himself at a junction, ensuring Rice and Nixia could escape while he held off pursuers. The weight of these losses pressed on Rice as they finally reached the tunnel entrance and sealed it behind them. "What exactly did you do?" Nixia asked as they hurried back toward the command center. "That was more than simple data corruption. I inverted the crystal resonance frequencies and locked them in a feedback loop," Rice explained between breaths. "When they try to transmit the data, it will create a destructive interference pattern in their systems." Nixia stopped abruptly. That would require intimate knowledge of both technologies. I've been studying your scientific archives since I arrived, Reyes admitted. Some concepts translated better than others, but crystal structures are universal constants. Her antennae quivered with what might have been admiration. You are a remarkable specimen, Reyes Morgan. Back at the command center, Varys received their report with measured optimism. If your sabotage works, it buys us time. But the collective still controls our surface infrastructure. There's more, Reyes said. I embedded a signal in their transmission, a distress call on frequencies used by human emergency beacons. Earth is too distant to respond in time, one counselor objected. But the human outpost at Proxima Centauri isn't, Reyes countered. And there's a research vessel scheduled to arrive today with a military escort. Right on cue, the command center's deep space sensors detected new signatures entering the system, human vessels approaching at maximum speed. You knew they were coming, Varys realized. I suspected, Reyes corrected. My research mission was part of a larger initiative. The military escort was classified. Protection for the research team, officially, but actually a show of force in this sector. Events accelerated rapidly after that. The collective command ship, attempting to process the sabotage data, suffered catastrophic systems failures that cascaded through their fleet. With their coordination compromised, they were unprepared for the arrival of Earth forces responding to an apparent distress call from a human citizen. The battle was brief but decisive. Most collective vessels retreated rather than engage on two fronts, leaving their ground forces isolated. Kaelari resistance, coordinated from the ancestral chambers, reclaimed key facilities within hours. 3 days later, Reyes stood beside Varys and Nyxia as representatives from Earth and Kaelura Prime signed an unprecedented mutual defense agreement. The collective threat had accomplished what years of diplomatic overtures could not. Genuine alliance between species. The Council has unanimously voted to share modified crystal resonance technology with Earth, Varys informed Reyes as the ceremony concluded. A gesture of trust and appreciation. And the debt of life? Reyes asked. Is it satisfied? Varys's antennae moved in a pattern he now recognized as amusement. That is for you to determine as tradition demands. Reyes looked at Nyxia, who had become far more than an obligation during their shared ordeal. Something in her multifaceted eyes suggested she felt the same connection. I'm not sure I want it to end, he admitted. Being bound to you both has become important to me. Then perhaps, Nyxia suggested, we might redefine the terms, not as debt and obligation, but as alliance and choice.